Oh, where are they? Oh, goodness. Oh, where are they? Oh, they're coming! Oh, my goodness! Ah! 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 Oh, oh, oh my goodness! Oh my goodness! Okay. I think I lost them. Welcome to the weekly Devo. Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in again. This week we're going to look at Ruth, the book of Ruth, one of the small, short books in the Old Testament. It's 4 chapters long, about 3 to 5 pages long. It's very short, but there's a great message from it, a great story from it. It starts out in chapter 1 by saying, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. And it reminds us of how dark and difficult and how dreary those days were when the judges were ruling. And it starts out with saying there's a famine in the land as well. So the main characters at the very beginning are Elimelech, Naomi, and their 2 sons. Elimelech decides to move to Moab, which was an enemy of Israel. So there's a famine in Israel, so they go to Moab and search for food and to be able to provide for his family. So when they get there, after some time, we don't know how long, but Elimelech dies. And so Naomi is left with her 2 sons. Her 2 sons marry Moabite women, and their names were Orpah and Ruth. And so after some time, the 2 sons end up dying. So Naomi is left with no more men in the family and is left with only Orpah and Ruth, her daughters-in-law. So she tells them, I want to go back to Israel. I want to go back to Bethlehem where I'm from. You stay here. Don't come with me. You stay here in your native land. It'll be hard for you if you move to Israel. So Orpah takes her advice and stays. Of course, she didn't necessarily want to. They were both, Ruth and Orpah were very, very emotional, with Naomi leaving. But Ruth shows amazing loyalty to Naomi and goes with her, tells her, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. Now, the reason why that was such loyalty in that is because Ruth is now the only one that can have that name continue, have that lineage through their family continue through Naomi's family. All the men are dead in that family now. She's the only one left that can continue that name. So they go back to Israel. Ruth starts following the God of Israel now, Jehovah God. So they get back, and it's in the middle of barley harvest, and so they're looking for food. So Ruth goes out to a field and starts picking grain, and it ends up being Boaz's field. Boaz learns who she is, learns why she got here. He learns that she's a Moabite woman, an immigrant, and learns her story and how she showed amazing loyalty to Naomi. And so he shows great generosity to her, which is actually fulfilling a commandment in Deuteronomy. So he shows great generosity to her. He gives her the amenities she needs to be able to provide for herself and Naomi, and treats her really well. So she comes back. Ruth goes back to Naomi and says, this is the field, and tells her all about the whole story about her and Boaz, and picked grain from Boaz's field. And Naomi's just so happy because she tells Ruth that Boaz is our family redeemer. Now, a family redeemer during that time, during that culture, was someone, if the man in the family died, there's no other men in that immediate family, then the family redeemer would come in, marry the widow, take up the land, and protect the family. So she tells her Naomi now tells Ruth what you need to do. Okay, Ruth and Boaz kind of have some sort of, they're nice to each other and they treat each other nice, and they start building somewhat of a friendly relationship. So she tells her, go to Boaz and lay at his feet, and he will ask what you want. And she tells Ruth, tell him, I want you to redeem this family and to marry me. So Boaz tells her, you are a woman of noble character, which relates back to Proverbs 31. And so he says, yes, I will redeem your family. I will marry you. So in chapter 4, that's where we see Boaz redeems the family and marries Ruth. Now the cool thing about this is that they end up bearing a son. They give birth to a son, and the son's name is Obed. In verse 22 of chapter 4, we learn who Obed is. Obed fathered Jesse, and Jesse fathered David. Boaz and Ruth were King David's great-grandparents. Amazing story of how the providence of God works through these kind of people. Works through a Moabite woman who accepts God, Jehovah God, as her God. Goes to God's people, accepts them as her people. Leaves the Moabite religion, the society that she grew up in that was comfortable to her, and goes somewhere else. A woman like that, the lineage of Christ comes through. And something else cool about Boaz is, in Matthew chapter 1, we see the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And it tells us that Rahab was Boaz's mother. Rahab the harlot. The one that hid the spies in Jericho. A Moabite woman and the son of a harlot. Father, David's grandfather. An amazing story of God's providence. It gives us 2 points we can look at. There's other points, but here's 2 points you can think about that may relate to your life a little more. Sometimes we consider our okay living acceptable to God. And we forget how we can help people all over the world. We think, okay, well, we're just going day to day. We're doing the same thing. We're going to school. We're doing this activity. We're doing this and this over and over again. It's mundane and it's comfortable as well. And though it may get boring, we still find comfort in it. And we accept that. That okay living, we feel like it's acceptable to God. Now, I'm not saying everybody drop what they're doing and go be missionaries, but sometimes we have that feeling of, oh, this okay living, it's fine, it's acceptable to God. And we forget that we can impact people all over the world. Ruth could have stayed in Moab. She could have stayed in that comfort she grew up in. But she decided to leave and to seek something far greater. She may not have realized that she was going after something much greater than she already had. She probably, the biggest feeling she had was her respect for Naomi. But in her respect for Naomi and showing loyalty to her, there was a huge decision made that impacted the world and fathered David's grandfather. And they are in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. Another point. Small decisions that you make could change the outcome of generations to come. Like I said, Ruth probably thought her small decision of leaving Moab, following Naomi, probably was not that big of a deal. She was just doing what was right in that moment. Very small decision. Boaz thought, okay, well, Ruth is, a nice woman, noble character. It's my job as a family redeemer to take care of this family. Small decision in his mind, ends up being a huge decision that impacts generations to come. Sometimes we may think our small, insignificant lives, we may think that our lives are so small and insignificant and not important. But in the eyes of God, your life can be so impactful and so huge and impact generations to come. Small decisions that you make, you might say, well, I was just doing what was right. But doing what is right, those decisions are huge. And God can work through us in so many amazing ways when we make the right decisions. Though small, can make a huge impact on the world. Thank you and have a great day.